3 years after leaving his pregnant wife, the millionaire saw her with triplets at a gala. The golden lights of the city glistened on the wet pavement as Camila walked out of the tiny bookstore where she worked. She pulled her cardigan tighter against her chest, the wind biting at her skin, but inside, her heart felt warm. Warm in that beautiful, terrifying way that only love can bring. For the past 6 months, her world had been filled with secret laughter, whispered promises, and hands that always found their way back to each other. She had met Daniel in the quietest corner of the library, a man who looked completely out of place surrounded by dusty poetry books and antique maps. But that was what drew her to him. Daniel didn't introduce himself right away. He asked questions about authors she'd never heard anyone mention before. Rilke, Pessoa, Neruda. He listened when she spoke. He smiled, but it was never arrogant. It was gentle. He returned every week. First, she thought it was coincidence. Eventually, she realized he was choosing her. One night, after she closed the bookstore, she found him waiting in the rain. No umbrella, no driver, no pretense. Just Daniel, soaking wet and laughing like a child. "Why are you here?" she asked, smiling despite herself. "Because," he replied, taking off his coat and putting it over her shoulders. "I realize the only books I care about now are the ones you talk about." That night, he kissed her for the first time under a flickering street lamp. The kiss was soft, hesitant, but filled with meaning. She didn't know yet that he was the heir to the Park Group, one of the largest conglomerates in the country. He never mentioned it. He let her fall in love with the man, not the title. And she did. Completely, foolishly, beautifully. They started seeing each other in secret. Coffee dates tucked away in corners of the city. Long walks by the river late at night. Moments stolen from two very different worlds. But love, as pure as it was, couldn't exist in a vacuum. Camila remembered the first time she saw his phone light up with a name she didn't recognize. Mother. The tone of his voice always changed when he answered. Colder, controlled, as if he were shrinking. One day, she asked gently, "Do they know about me?" Daniel looked at her for a long time, then reached out and brushed a strand of hair behind her ear. "Not yet. I want to keep this ours. Just a little longer." But the longer he waited, the more the silence grew between them. Camila tried to ignore it. She wanted to believe in love more than anything. And when she discovered she was pregnant, her first instinct wasn't fear. It was joy. She imagined telling him. His surprised expression, then the smile she had fallen in love with. She imagined them sitting together, planning a future, holding hands over a tiny heartbeat. But the reality was nothing like that. It was raining again when she called him. "Daniel, I have something to tell you. Can we meet?" There was a long pause. "Tonight?" he asked. "Yes, it's important." He agreed to come to her apartment. She waited all evening, pacing, her heart racing every time a car passed. But hours went by. Midnight came. No knock, no message, nothing. The next day, she received a single text. "I'm sorry. I can't do this anymore." She stared at her screen, rereading it 100 times, the words cutting deeper each time. She tried calling, no answer. She waited outside the bookstore every night for a week, hoping he would appear. But he was gone. No explanation, no goodbye, just gone. Camila's world shattered. She sat alone on her bed that night, the rain tapping against the window like a cruel lullaby. Her hands cradled her stomach, not yet showing, but already growing life inside her. "How am I going to do this?" she whispered through tears. "How am I going to raise this baby alone?" She wanted to hate him. She wanted to scream. But mostly, she just wanted him to come back and say it was all a mistake. But he didn't. Days turned into weeks. Then a letter came from the landlord. She had 10 days to vacate the apartment. Someone had paid him to remove her. Confused and heartbroken, she later discovered it was Daniel's mother, the same woman who had never met her, but knew enough to see her as a threat to the Park family name. Camila stood outside the apartment with only a suitcase and a folder of ultrasound images. The city moved around her like she didn't exist. She sat on a bench in the park, tears frozen on her cheeks, the weight of abandonment pressing so hard on her chest she could barely breathe. But as the sun rose the next morning, something shifted inside her. She looked down at her belly, placed a trembling hand over it, and whispered, "I don't know how, but I will protect you. I will protect all of you." She didn't know it yet, but 3 tiny hearts were beating inside her. And though she felt more broken than ever before, those hearts would become her reason to survive, her reason to fight, her reason to never look back. Let me know when you're ready to continue with topic 2, and I'll take you into the next chapter of this emotional journey. Você diz. Certo? Agora tu como narrador e storyteller desenvolva a história sem marcos com o nome de cada tópico que for desenvolve. Me conte sobre o tópico tu com dialogo como su faço espectador, sempre lembrando de desenvolver com muita moco, com muitos sentimentos de forma que a estrutura de narrativa utiliza uma linha temporal linear de modo o espectador sentir o que o personagem está sentindo amigos. Com 6.000 characters o ChatGPT diz. Of course, let's continue. Now I'll tell you what happened next. The moment Camila discovered the life growing inside her, and how everything began to unravel, even deeper than before. Close your eyes if you will. Listen to her heart. Camila stood in the clinic's hallway, her hands clutching a small envelope containing the results. The white walls around her felt too bright, too clean, sterile like a place untouched by real pain. Her legs trembled as she sat down on the cold plastic chair in the waiting area. A nurse, noticing her expression, gave a kind smile. "You're not alone," she said softly. Camila tried to smile back, but she was. She opened the envelope with trembling fingers, and as her eyes scanned the words, "positive gestational age, 8 weeks," a single tear escaped down her cheek. Then another, then another. She pressed the paper to her chest and closed her eyes, whispering the first prayer she had said in years. "Please let me be strong, for this baby, for us." In the taxi on the way home, she held her belly. It still felt surreal. There was life inside her. Daniel's life, their child. Despite the silence, despite the cruel text, a piece of him still lived within her. And for a moment, just a small, fragile moment, it gave her hope. That night, she sat down at her tiny kitchen table and wrote him a letter. "Daniel, I don't know why you left. I don't understand what happened between the person who kissed my forehead every night and the one who disappeared without a word. But I'm not writing this to ask questions or beg for explanations. I'm writing because you have the right to know. I'm pregnant. I found out 2 days ago. I was going to tell you in person, but you never came. Then you sent that message and I cried for hours, Daniel. But not because of the baby. That was the only thing that gave me peace. It reminded me that some part of what we had was real. I'm keeping the baby. I don't expect anything from you. I don't need your money or your name. But if there's even a tiny part of you that loved me, I want you to know. I wanted this child to be born from truth, not secrets." Camila, she put it in an envelope. She planned to leave it with the bookstore owner, who still had Daniel's assistant's contact. But the next morning, when she arrived to open the shop, the locks had been changed. A printed notice on the door said the business was under new ownership. She called the owner, her voice shaking. "What happened?" "I was offered 3 times the value to sell, Camila. Overnight, a man came, said it was urgent, and that your presence wasn't needed anymore." She didn't have to ask who had orchestrated it. She knew. Daniel's mother. The same force that had destroyed her chance at a life with him was now erasing her from every corner of his world. She stood there for what felt like hours, holding the letter in her hand, until the wind pulled it from her fingers and carried it into the street. Camila didn't chase it. She let it go. The following weeks were cruel. With no job, no income, and nowhere to stay, she wandered from shelter to shelter. People offered advice, blankets, sometimes a meal, but never permanence. No one knew how to help a pregnant woman carrying more than just sorrow. One rainy night, curled up under the roof of a church entrance, she pressed her forehead against the stone wall and whispered to her unborn child, I'm sorry you didn't get a father, but I promise, you will get a mother who fights. She found a low-paying job cleaning an old photography studio. The owner, Mr. Han, was an elderly man who didn't ask questions. He gave her a tiny attic room above the shop. You remind me of my daughter, he said one day. She also loved quietly and suffered loudly. Camila worked until her fingers bled, determined to save every cent. Her belly grew, and with it, her resilience. Some days, she cried silently into her pillow at night. Others, she smiled at her reflection, whispering little songs to the life inside her. She refused to go to public hospitals after what she had suffered, and instead sought a humble midwife named Yunmi, who had lost her own child years before and took Camila under her wing. You're stronger than most, Yunmi would say while touching her belly. Do you feel them? Camila blinked. Them? Yunmi chuckled. Oh, sweetheart, you're not carrying one baby. You're carrying three. Three. The word echoed in Camila's mind like a storm. She couldn't speak at first. Her vision blurred. 3 babies. No father. No family. No help. But instead of breaking her, it ignited something fierce. I will protect them, she whispered, with everything I have. Months passed. On a freezing winter night, her water broke. She called Yunmi with shaking hands, barely able to breathe from the pain. There was no ambulance, no luxury suite, just an old wooden floor and trembling hands. 12 hours of labor, screams that shook the walls, tears, some from agony, others from fear. But then came the first cry, then another, and another. 3 voices, delicate, desperate, alive. Camila collapsed into sobs as Yunmi placed the babies in her arms. They were so small, so perfect, so identical, all with Daniel's eyes. She stared at them through tears, her heart splitting open. I'm your mother, she whispered, voice raw. I'm all you have, but I swear, I'll be enough. In that moment, the girl who had once dreamed of love in libraries was gone. In her place stood a woman, a mother, forged by pain, strengthened by devotion, and ready to face a world that had tried to silence her. She named them June, the oldest, the protector; Min, the quiet one, the dreamer; Sei, the smallest, the fire. She looked at her 3 sons sleeping in her arms, and for the first time in months, she smiled without pain behind it. They were her beginning, not her end. And far away, in a high-rise tower of glass and steel, Daniel sat in his office, sipping wine, staring out at the city lights, unaware that the best parts of him had just entered the world without him. You did the right thing, she said, slicing into her papaya with clinical precision. She would have ruined everything. A scandal like that? An unwed girl with no background? You don't understand how fragile our reputation is, Daniel. He didn't answer. He just stared down at his plate, untouched, the scrambled eggs congealing under the golden light of a chandelier he had always hated. His mother continued, elegant and venomous. One day you'll thank me. But he never did. Instead, he buried himself in work. The park group swallowed his life whole. Meetings, boardrooms, flight after flight across the globe. His name started appearing in business magazines. Daniel Park, the cold-blooded heir. Investors called him brilliant, ruthless, unshakable. They didn't know that he still heard Camila's laugh in his dreams. They didn't know that every time he passed a woman with dark, gentle eyes on the street, his heart paused, hoping, just for a moment, that maybe she turned around and it was her. It never was. In his penthouse, everything was silent. No laughter, no music, just the hum of machinery and the endless ticking of an antique clock his father had left him. The only thing he hadn't yet sold or buried in a vault. His mother noticed the changes. She brought women to dinners, set up interviews with reporters, tried to polish his image as Korea's most eligible bachelor. He played along, smiled at the cameras, answered questions like a machine. But late at night, when the city quieted, he sat by the window with a glass of wine and stared into the dark. Where did you go? He whispered once, voice cracking. He had tried to find her. Once. quietly, paid a private investigator against his mother's orders. But after 2 weeks, the man returned empty-handed. "She disappeared, sir. No paper trail. It's like she never existed." Daniel dismissed him with a nod and never spoke of it again. But he knew. He knew his mother had ensured that Camila was erased. Sometimes he wondered what he would have said if he had the chance. Would he have asked for forgiveness? Would he have told her the truth, that he had been afraid of becoming his father, of losing everything again, of not being enough for her or for a child? He didn't know anymore. All he knew was that he missed her in ways he didn't know how to say, and that the silence left behind by her absence was louder than anything else in his life. Years passed. One by one, his friends married, had children, settled into soft lives. Daniel stayed on the move, cold, focused, untouchable, until one night at a corporate gala in Shanghai, he saw a little boy dart past him. Maybe 4 years old, maybe 5. The child had dark brown curls and the exact shade of eyes Daniel saw in the mirror every morning. He froze. The boy's mother came running after him. Not Camila, just someone else. But the image stayed burned in his mind. He excused himself from the table, went to the hotel rooftop, and stared at the skyline until dawn. The image of that child wouldn't leave him, not because it was his, but because it reminded him of the one that could have been, that should have been. He tried to shake it off, told himself it was just nostalgia, a side effect of age creeping in and memories refusing to die. But he couldn't stop wondering, what if she had kept it? What if somewhere out there, his child was alive? Was it a boy? A girl? Did they look like her or like him? Did they laugh the way Camila used to, like sunlight breaking through clouds? He had pushed those thoughts away for 5 years, but now they haunted him. And what haunted him more was the thought that maybe, just maybe, they would grow up never knowing who their father was. One evening, back in Seoul, as he reviewed a contract in his office high above the Han River, his secretary entered with a hesitant knock. "There's an invitation for you, sir, from the Children's Hope Foundation." He glanced up. "The annual charity gala," she explained. "They want to honor you for your recent donations to orphan housing." He didn't remember authorizing that donation. Probably a PR move his team had made. Still, he nodded. "Fine. Accept." It was just another event, another suit, another camera flash. He didn't know yet that that single decision, to attend a meaningless gala, would unravel everything he had tried so hard to bury. That night, he went home to his empty apartment and poured himself a drink. He stared at the city through the floor-to-ceiling windows and whispered the same question he'd asked every night for the last 5 years. "Where are you, Camila?" And this time, somewhere in the city, Camila was whispering too, rocking her children to sleep. Unaware of the storm, Camila stood in the center of the room, gently tying Min's shoes while June wrestled with his shirt and Sae played with a toy truck that had already lost a wheel. Her long hair was braided over her shoulder, and exhaustion clung to the corners of her eyes like shadows, but so did strength. A strength born not from ease, but from surviving what others never could. "Amma?" Sae asked, tilting his head with wide, curious eyes. "Why do we have to wear nice clothes today? I don't like ties." Camila smiled softly, brushing his hair with her fingers. "Because today is special, sweetheart. We're visiting Auntie Hannah's work. Remember? She wants to take pictures of you." "Why?" June asked with a frown, already suspicious. "Because she says you're the most handsome boys in the whole city," Camila replied. "Is there gonna be cake?" Min whispered, always the quiet one, his voice full of hope. Camila let out a light laugh, the kind that faded quickly. Maybe. They didn't know the full truth, that their Auntie Hannah worked part-time as a photographer and, thanks to a client's last-minute cancellation, had offered Camila a chance, just one, to attend a gala event, delivering flower arrangements. "You could bring the boys," Hannah had said, half-joking. "It's a room full of strangers. No one will care." Camila had hesitated. She never stepped into that world anymore. Too many ghosts, too much risk. But she also knew she couldn't hide forever. So she said yes. And now, her heart was fluttering like fragile paper in a storm. As she looked at her children, her heart squeezed. Every time she saw them, identical smiles, identical eyes, she remembered him. Daniel, the man who had loved her with whispers and disappeared like wind. She didn't hate him. Not anymore. Hate required space in her heart she no longer had. She had replaced it with survival. The boys finished dressing, and she knelt down in front of them. "Now listen, okay?" she said softly. "When we go in, you stay close to me. Don't run off, and no touching the sculptures." "Even if they're cool?" June asked. "Even then." Min tugged on her sleeve. "Will we see Daddy there?" The question hit like a knife. Camila froze, just for a second. Her voice stayed calm, but her fingers tightened around her purse strap. "No," she said gently. "Not tonight." Min nodded, as if satisfied with the answer. But inside, something shifted. A small tremor. They asked more and more now. They had no picture, no name, but they knew. Children always know. She swallowed that ache and took their hands. The gala was held at a luxurious hotel, the kind with golden chandeliers and floor-length glass windows that stretched toward the stars. Camila kept her head low as they entered through the service entrance with Hannah, balancing a bouquet of white orchids while keeping a firm grip on Sae's hand. Hannah wore her hair in a tight bun and looked like she belonged in this world. She turned to Camila as they passed the catering tables. "You look beautiful," she said. Camila gave a tight smile. "I feel like I'm trespassing." "You're not. You're surviving in style." They both laughed, but Camila's eyes kept scanning the crowd, just in case. The ballroom shimmered with music and clinking glasses. Men in sharp suits, women in glittering gowns. Waiters glided between them with silver trays like dancers in a quiet ballet. "Stay right here," she whispered to the boys as they sat by a quiet corner. "I'll just be a few feet away helping Auntie." Sae looked up. "Can I have juice?" "Only if you don't spill it on your tie." He grinned. Camila turned to help Hannah set the last arrangement, her heart still drumming louder than the cello playing in the background. Then something strange happened. A silence. Not in the room, no, the music and laughter continued, but in her body. Like the air shifted. She felt it before she saw him. A ripple in the fabric of the moment. She turned slowly, and there he was, across the room, in a black suit, surrounded by important men, holding a glass of wine, his posture regal, his face sharper than she remembered. Older, tired, beautiful, haunted. Daniel. Her breath stopped, her chest stilled. 5 years. 5 years of wondering if he ever looked back. 5 years of not knowing if he was alive, if he remembered, if he had forgotten her completely. And there he was, looking exactly like the man she had loved, and the man who had destroyed her. She turned her face quickly, instinctively pulling her hair to one side, hoping he wouldn't see, hoping she could disappear into the crowd again. But fate, as always, had other plans. Sae's laughter broke through the air, loud, joyful, unmistakable. Daniel turned, and his eyes landed on them, on her, and then on the boys. 3 of them. His hand froze mid-air. The wine glass slipped slightly, but he caught it just in time. He blinked, once, twice, as if trying to clear a dream, and then he began to walk, slowly, deliberately, toward them. Camila felt the blood drain from her face. She grabbed the boys quickly, whispering urgently, "We need to go. Now." "But I didn't finish my juice," Sae protested. "We'll get more at home." Hannah saw what was happening and stepped forward, but it was too late. Daniel was only a few feet away now. He stopped. "Camila?" His voice, the same voice from her memories, deep, careful, full of disbelief. She turned to face him, not because she wanted to, but because she had no choice. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Just silence, and eyes that held 5 years of unanswered questions. The boys looked up, studying the strange man who stared at them like a ghost. Camila's voice, when it came, was sharp, controlled. "You shouldn't be here. He looked down at the boys again. His lips parted slightly. "Are they?" She stepped in front of them. "It doesn't matter." His eyes flicked between her and the children. It does. It matters. Her hands trembled slightly, but her voice did not. You don't get to show up after 5 years and decide what matters. Daniel swallowed hard. His expression shattered. I didn't know. I swear I didn't. You didn't want to know, she cut in. And for a second, he couldn't deny it. He looked down, shame folding his shoulders. I'm sorry, he whispered. Camila, I'm so sorry. But sorry was too small a word. Too late. Too broken. She shook her head, the pain finally spilling into her voice. I survived without you. They did too. Don't try to rewrite history now. The crowd moved around them, oblivious. But inside that moment, the world had stopped. She turned, gathering the boys once more. Let's go home, she said gently. And they left, leaving Daniel standing alone, breathless, in the middle of everything he had built. Watching the only things that had ever truly mattered walk away. His chest was tight. His hands trembled around the edge of his glass, untouched. 3 boys, triplets. There was no doubt in his mind. He had seen their faces, all 3 of them. His eyes, his expression when they frowned. One of them even had the tiny nervous tic he had as a child, tugging the hem of his shirt when nervous. And Camila, she looked like a woman who had walked through fire and somehow came out standing. Stronger, colder, unreachable. He had wanted to run after her, to drop to his knees and beg her not to vanish again. But she had turned so quickly, like the very sight of him hurt, and he knew he didn't deserve to ask for anything. Sir, a voice interrupted behind him, his secretary, nervous, always afraid to speak when his expression was like this. They're waiting for your closing remarks inside. Daniel didn't turn. Cancel it, he said, barely audible. But I said cancel it. There was a pause. Then the click of shoes retreating. Daniel closed his eyes. For 5 years, he had told himself he'd been right. That leaving her had spared them both pain. That it had been a sacrifice. That he wasn't ready. That she was better off without him. Lies. Convenient, polished lies wrapped in logic and pride. And now he had seen what his cowardice had cost him. He had missed first words, first steps, birthdays, tears, laughter, 1,000 moments that would never come again. He pressed his fists into the stone ledge, the glass slipping and shattering at his feet. It didn't matter. Nothing did right now. The question he'd whispered into the night for years finally had an answer. She was alive, and he had children, 3 children, and they looked at him like strangers. Across the city, Camila sat in the quiet of her room, knees pulled to her chest, while the boys slept peacefully just a few feet away on the floor. She couldn't stop shaking, not from fear, but from the weight of everything that had crashed over her like a wave the moment her eyes met his. Daniel, he looked older, not just older in years, older in soul. Tired, empty, just like her. But that didn't change anything. Her hands gripped the edge of the bed as tears finally escaped the walls she'd built around her for years. Silent, slow tears that carried 5 years of pain, betrayal, and longing she had never voiced. She had rehearsed what she'd say if she ever saw him again. She had imagined spitting rage, or turning her back proudly. But instead, she had just frozen. Because in that moment, all the strength she'd cultivated cracked. He had seen the boys. He knew now. That terrified her more than anything. She had kept them hidden not out of revenge, but out of fear. Fear that he'd try to take them. That he'd show up one day with lawyers and cold apologies and promises he couldn't keep. She didn't know what he was capable of anymore. She didn't know who he had become. Amma, a small voice mumbled. Camila looked down. June had stirred, rubbing his eyes. Why are you crying? He whispered, sitting up. She wiped her cheeks quickly. I'm not, sweetheart. Go back to sleep. But he didn't lie down. He crawled into her arms, curling against her chest. He looked like me, June said softly. The man from the party. Camila's breath hitched. She didn't respond. I liked his eyes, he continued. They were sad, like yours. Camila closed her eyes, holding her son tighter. She didn't know how to shield them from what might come next. The following day, Daniel stood in his office with his back to the floor-to-ceiling windows, staring blankly at a report he hadn't read. His mother entered without knocking, wearing her usual expression of superiority. "I heard you left the gala early," she said. "That was reckless." He turned slowly. Her eyes narrowed. "What happened?" Daniel's voice was quiet, but steady. "I saw her." That was all he said, but the color drained from her face. "You what? Who?" "You know who," he said. Her lips tightened. "And the children," he added. She tried to recover. "Daniel, you lied to me. I protected you." "No," he said sharply, louder now. "You destroyed something I loved. You destroyed them." She stepped back. "You think money gives you that right?" he asked. "To decide who's worthy of me? To erase someone's existence like she was a stain on our name?" His mother's face was blank now, cold. "She was weak. And you?" "She raised 3 children alone," he cut in, "while I sat here building an empire on silence." Pause. Then she said quietly, "What are you going to do?" "I don't know," he replied. And for the first time in years, Daniel Park felt completely lost. Later that evening, Camila received a message from an unknown number. Simple, short. "Please, just let me see them. One time. That's all I ask." She stared at the screen for a long time. Then she deleted it. 3 days since she had seen his face again. The one she had carried in her memory like a scar. A map of a love that once meant everything. Camila tried to continue with her life as if nothing had happened. The boys went to school. She went to work at the small bakery down the street. She folded laundry, scrubbed dishes, swept the wooden floor of their little home. But her hands moved on autopilot. Her mind was always somewhere else. Back in that ballroom, back in the moment when Daniel's eyes met hers and the air between them shattered into pieces. And now that message. She'd deleted it, but it lingered in her thoughts. Just one time he'd written. But she knew better than to believe that. You can't unsee your own children and go back to pretending they don't exist. And you can't open a door that nearly killed you the first time it closed. That afternoon, as she walked home from work with SAE in one hand and a grocery bag in the other, her phone buzzed again. Not Daniel. This time, Hannah. "We need to talk. Important. Meet me at the flower shop. Now." Camila felt a sharp pang in her chest. She hated surprises now. Good ones didn't exist anymore. When she arrived, Hannah was waiting outside with a folder in her hands and a strange expression. Excitement mixed with unease. "What happened?" Camila asked immediately. Hannah hesitated, then handed her the folder. Camila opened it. An invitation. Children's Hope Foundation Gala, special honoree, Daniel Park. The same foundation as last time. But this time something was different. Hannah pointed to the bottom of the letter. "Read the fine print." Camila's eyes scanned the text, then froze. "Guest florist, Camila Lee." She blinked. "What? I didn't apply for this." "I did," Hannah admitted, her voice low. "They asked for submissions. I used your name. I didn't think it would be chosen, but Camila, they loved your arrangements. They want you to create the centerpiece display. You'd be paid." "Well," Camila's throat tightened. "Did he do this?" "No. It went through a committee." Asked. He had no say. She still didn't believe in coincidences. "Camila," Hannah said gently, "you need the money. You said the roof is leaking again. The boys need winter coats. This job could help." She looked away. "I'm not asking you to talk to him," Hannah added. "You'll be behind the scenes. Invisible." But Camila had learned that some ghosts never stay behind the curtain. Still, she nodded. Not for herself. For her boys. Meanwhile, Daniel sat alone in his office. The invitation already opened on his desk. He wasn't surprised to see his name printed in bold letters. But he was surprised by the storm inside him. Another gala. Another room filled with people who saw him as a symbol of success. Not as a man drowning in regret. He didn't want the spotlight. He didn't want the title, but he had agreed, because maybe, just maybe, he hoped she would come. He knew it was irrational, knew it was selfish, but hope had become a disease in him, a whisper he couldn't silence. His phone buzzed. His mother. Again. He didn't answer. She had tried to call every day since their confrontation. He had nothing left to say to her. He looked at the other item on his desk. A photo, not a professional one, blurry, taken secretly by the investigator he had rehired after seeing her again. In the photo, Camila stood at a market stall, holding the hand of a little boy with curls. She looked tired, but radiant. He stared at it for a long time, then picked up his phone and typed another message. Please, I'm not asking for forgiveness, just the truth. Are they mine? He stared at the screen, then deleted the message again. The night before the gala, Camila stood in her small kitchen, brushing flour from her apron as she packed 3 school lunches. The boys had just fallen asleep, curled up together like puppies in their shared bed. She walked to their room and stood by the doorway for a long time, watching their chests rise and fall. She thought about what it had taken to get here. All the nights she cried into a pillow so they wouldn't hear. All the mornings she forced herself out of bed when her heart didn't want to beat. All the birthdays where she baked tiny cakes with borrowed flour and whispered stories of a brave mother and her lion cubs. They didn't know. Not really. Not yet. She sat at the edge of their bed and gently touched June's hand. "Amma's going to be brave tomorrow," she whispered, even if her heart was shaking, even if the past was standing on the other side of that ballroom door. At the same moment, Daniel stood before his mirror, adjusting the tie he hadn't worn in months. He looked at himself, the same face, but something inside was different. He no longer cared about the awards, the applause, the legacy. He just wanted to look into the eyes of the only people that mattered now, and somehow make them understand that even if he had failed before, he was ready to fight now. Even if it was too late, even if all he could do was stand in the distance and say, "I see you. I'm here." The clock ticked toward midnight in 2 separate homes, one filled with silence, the other with hope too fragile to name. And as the stars watched overhead, both hearts, once bound, then broken, prepared to walk into the same room again, not as lovers, not as strangers. Her long black dress wasn't designer, borrowed, simple, but it clung to her with grace. Her hair was pulled back, face bare except for a touch of blush Hannah had insisted on. She didn't look like a guest. She didn't want to be one. "Straight to the main table," said the event coordinator, barely looking at her. "Your team's arrangement will be placed center stage, right before the award segment." Camila nodded silently and walked through the corridor toward the ballroom, heels clicking softly against the floor. She could hear laughter through the walls, the clink of champagne glasses, the rise and fall of a string quartet playing something elegant. Her heartbeat pulsed in her ears louder than all of it. She had already decided she wouldn't look for him. She didn't need to. He would be there. Of course he would. And if fate was cruel enough, she would feel his eyes before she saw them. Daniel was sitting at the front table, surrounded by dignitaries and board members who kept raising glasses in his name, praising his generosity, his vision, his future. He nodded when necessary, smiled occasionally, but his eyes never stopped scanning the room. He had almost convinced himself she wouldn't come. And then she did. He felt it before he turned. The shift in the air, the rush of blood to his chest, the pause in time, and when he finally looked toward the far end of the ballroom, there she was, moving through the crowd like a ghost he had only dreamed of, head down, focused, trying to disappear. She was still the most vivid thing in the room. Daniel stood without realizing it. Someone tapped his shoulder. "They're about to start," said a voice beside him, but it was all muffled now. He was already moving. Camila placed the final white orchid into the center of the display, carefully adjusting the petals. Her hands trembled slightly, but she didn't let it show. She leaned back, exhaled slowly, and turned to leave, and froze. Daniel was standing just a few feet behind her, not surrounded by anyone, not hiding, just there, watching her with an expression she didn't know what to do with. She straightened her shoulders. Her fingers clenched around her clipboard. "Don't," she said before he could speak. He stopped. "I'm not here for this," he said softly. "I am," she answered. Their eyes locked. His, pleading. Hers, unreadable. "I don't want to cause a scene," he said. "Then, walk away." "I can't." Camila's breath caught. The sound of silverware, glasses, and music blurred in the background. "Why are you doing this?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Because I saw them, Camila," he said. "Because I see them in my sleep now. And I don't know how I've been breathing for 5 years without knowing they existed." She blinked rapidly, fury and grief crashing inside her like waves. "You left," she said. "You made that choice. I thought." "You thought," her voice cracked. "You thought it was easier to disappear than ask me what I needed? You thought walking away from me while I carried your children was a decision you had the right to make for both of us." People turned subtly, sensing tension. Daniel took a careful step forward. "I didn't know," he said again. "Not about the pregnancy. Not until I saw them." "But you knew I loved you," she said. "You knew I gave you everything. And you still walked away." He couldn't respond, so she turned. "I have nothing left to say to you." She began to walk. Fast. But then a sound cut through the room that made her stop in her tracks. "Amma!" She turned sharply, and her heart dropped. All 3 boys had entered the ballroom. Their tiny suits rumpled, faces lit with excitement. Hannah ran after them, mortified. "I'm sorry." They saw the pictures but it was too late. They had found her, and standing just behind her, they found him. The room fell quiet as if the universe itself was holding its breath. The boys stopped. 3 small pairs of brown eyes stared at the man in front of them. Sai was the first to whisper, "It's him." Daniel slowly knelt down, not speaking. His hands trembled. His mouth opened, but no words came. June stepped forward, one cautious step. "Are you the man who made Amma cry?" Camila closed her eyes, pain slicing through her. Daniel lowered his head. "Yes," he said softly. "I did." Silence. Then June, the oldest, looked up at his mother. "Can I ask him something?" Camila hesitated, then nodded once, lips trembling. June turned back to Daniel. "Are you our dad?" The room felt like it cracked in half. Daniel's voice broke as he whispered, "Yes." Min reached for Camila's hand. "What does that mean?" "It means," she said softly, "that the man standing in front of you gave you your eyes and your name and left me alone to raise the 3 bravest boys in the world." The boys looked between them, trying to make sense of something far too big for their age. Daniel swallowed hard. "I don't want to take anything from you," he said. "Not from them. I just want to know them. Even if they never call me anything but Daniel." Camila stared at him. At the man who had once disappeared without a word. At the man now breaking open in front of their children. She didn't answer. She couldn't. Not yet. So instead, she walked to her sons, knelt down, and wrapped her arms around all 3 of them. "We're going home now," she said gently. The boys nodded, still glancing at Daniel as they walked away. He didn't follow. He just stood there, alone again, but this time with his eyes open. But she knew they felt it. The shift, the way the air around them had changed. She could still see their eyes looking back at him, and his eyes trying to hold them like something precious he had never dared to dream was his. She hadn't cried when she got home. She didn't yell or break something like she used to in the early days when grief was hot and wild. Now it was silent, a pain that pressed quietly against her chest and wouldn't leave. Her phone lit up on the table. She didn't want to look, but she did. "Daniel, I understand if you never want to speak to me again, but thank you for letting me see them." She stared at the message for a long time. She didn't reply. Instead, she got up, walked to the boys' room, and stood in the doorway. They were tangled together in the same bed, Sai's arm across Min's chest. June curled near the foot like a protective dog. Their soft breathing was the only sound in the room. Camila covered them gently with the blanket, then sat down on the edge of the bed, her voice a whisper in the dark. Today you met your father. None of them stirred. I don't know if he'll stay or if he'll change. But what I do know, she said, her hand brushing Sae's hair, is that you were never missing anything. You've always been whole, with or without him. Her voice trembled. I just hope I did enough to show you that. The next morning, Daniel was sitting on the back patio of his penthouse, barefoot in a suit, a black coffee growing cold in his hand. He hadn't slept. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw their faces. The way June had looked at him. The question that hung in the air like a loaded gun. Are you the man who made Amma cry? He would hear that until the day he died. And he didn't know how to change it. How to fix something that deep, that broken. His assistant knocked hesitantly on the glass door. Sir? Daniel didn't move. Your mother is downstairs. I said I didn't want to see her. She insists. Daniel sighed. Let her up. A few minutes later, the click of designer heels echoed through the marble hallway. His mother entered like a shadow, poised, powerful, and far too quiet. I suppose I should congratulate you, she said coldly. You've made quite the headline. Daniel Park's secret family? Do you realize the media has been circling the building since 6 a.m.? Daniel didn't look at her. You lied to me, he said quietly. I protected you. No, he said, turning toward her now. You controlled me. His voice was steel now. You took her letter. You shut her out. And you let me think she just left. I would have been there if I had known. His mother didn't blink. You were young. You had an empire to build. She was nothing. He stepped forward slowly. She was everything. For the first time, something flickered in her eyes. Maybe fear. Maybe regret. Maybe too late for both. I want you to leave, he said. Daniel, I don't want you near them. Ever. I'm done living in the cage you built. She opened her mouth to argue, then closed it. And for the first time in their life, she obeyed. She turned and walked away. The next weekend, Camila took the boys to the park. It was sunny, the kind of day she normally would have cherished without thinking. But every laugh from the children, every kite in the sky, was shadowed by thoughts she couldn't shake. They had asked questions. Of course they had. Is he really our Appa? Why didn't he come sooner? Does he love us now? She hadn't known how to answer. Not fully. Not yet. Come push me, Amma. Min called from the swings. She smiled, stood up, and walked over. But before she could reach them, a familiar voice behind her froze her in place. I came to watch, not interfere. She turned. Daniel stood a few steps away, dressed simply, no guards, no pretense. Just him. He kept his hands at his sides. No sudden movements, like he was afraid she might disappear if he got too close. Camila said nothing, just stared. I've been outside this park 4 times this week, he admitted. I didn't come in. I just watched. She crossed her arms, unsure whether to be furious or afraid. Why? Because I didn't want to hurt them again. You already did. I know. Silence. The wind passed between them. Then softly he said, They're incredible. I don't deserve to even know their names. But I want to. Camila's heart squeezed. I want to be someone they can ask questions to, he said. Someone who doesn't disappear when the answers are hard. He took a slow breath. And I want to be someone you don't have to protect them from. Camila blinked fast, turning her head so he wouldn't see the emotion flooding her eyes. I'm not asking for your forgiveness, he said. I'll spend the rest of my life earning their trust. If you let me. She looked at him then, and for the first time, something in her didn't recoil. She still hurt, but she didn't feel alone. I don't know what this is, she whispered, or where it goes. Daniel nodded. Neither do I. She turned toward the boys on the swings. They were laughing, shouting for her to come back. Then she looked at him. Softly, she said, You can push S.E. just this once. Daniel blinked. His mouth parted. Are you sure? No, she whispered. but do it anyway. And so he walked slow and careful toward the smallest swing. Saeed looked up, confused at first, then smiled. "Hi," he said. "Are you that guy again?" Daniel knelt down beside him. "I'm Daniel, and I was hoping I could push you." Saeed grinned. "Okay, but I like going super high." Daniel chuckled. "I'll do my best." And as the swing lifted into the air, higher and higher, Camila stood a few steps away, unsure, uncertain, but no longer carrying everything alone. Something was shifting, slowly. Her fingers paused on a small blue sweater, June's favorite, the one Daniel had tried to give him that afternoon at the park. He had shown up again, not with gifts or grand gestures, but with quiet patience, just sitting on the bench while the boys ran in circles, occasionally laughing at their stories, never interrupting. She didn't know what surprised her more, the fact that he was coming back, or the fact that the boys were beginning to notice. She looked toward the small bedroom door, cracked just an inch. Through the slit, she could hear soft whispers. The boys weren't asleep. They were talking low and urgent. She walked toward it and paused. "I think he's our Appa for real," S.A.E. was saying. "He is," June answered. "He said so. But Amma didn't say it like that," Min added. She just nodded. A long pause. Then S.A.E. asked, "Why didn't he come before?" No one answered right away. Camila's throat tightened. Her hand hovered near the doorknob. June spoke again, voice quieter this time. "Maybe he didn't want us." Camila's heart shattered. She pushed the door open gently. 3 little heads turned toward her at once, wide-eyed, caught. "Amma?" Min said, voice small. "Were you listening?" "I was." They all shifted in bed, unsure of what to expect. Camila walked in slowly and sat at the foot of the mattress. "I heard your questions," she said softly, "and I think maybe it's time I tell you the truth." The room stilled. S.A.E. crawled into her lap, curling against her chest like he used to when he was scared of thunder. "Is he really our dad?" June asked. She nodded. "Yes, Daniel is your father." "But why did he leave?" Min asked, almost whispering. She swallowed hard. How do you tell a child the truth without breaking them? How do you explain abandonment without planting bitterness? She brushed S.A.E.'s hair gently and said, "When I told him I was going to have you, he didn't stay. He was afraid, and he made a terrible mistake." "Did he know about us?" June asked. "No," she said, her voice trembling. "He didn't. I tried to tell him. I wrote him a letter, but someone took it before he ever saw it." "Who?" She hesitated, and then decided they deserved honesty. "His mother. She didn't want him to be with me. She made sure he thought I had left without a word." Min sat up straighter. "So, he didn't choose to leave us? Just you?" Camila smiled faintly, tears brimming in her eyes. "He didn't know about you, but he still chose not to fight for me. And that's something only he can explain." "Do you still love him?" June asked bluntly. She froze. Silence filled the room. "I don't know," she whispered. That answer seemed to satisfy them more than a lie would have. S.A.E. looked up at her. "Can we still see him?" Camila looked into their eyes. They were not angry. They were curious, hopeful, wounded but willing. She nodded slowly. "Yes, if that's what you want." All 3 smiled, small, tentative smiles, like they were afraid the promise might vanish if they showed too much joy. S.A.E. kissed her cheek. "I still love you best." She laughed through tears. "You'd better." Later that night, when they were asleep and the world outside was quiet again, Camila stood by the window, arms wrapped around herself. She stared into the streetlights and let her thoughts drift. She had spent so many years building walls to protect her heart, to shield her sons. But now those same walls felt like they were trapping her in a past she didn't want to live in anymore. She wasn't ready to forgive. But maybe she was ready to see what came next. The next morning, Daniel was sitting in his car outside the school, nervously gripping the steering wheel. He had parked across the street, not wanting to alarm her, not wanting to cross a line. He had no idea if she would allow it. But then he saw her, walking down the sidewalk holding all 3 boys by the hand. The wind pushed her hair across her face. She brushed it back gently and looked up. Their eyes met, and for the first time since the gala, she smiled. Not fully, not entirely, but just enough to make his chest ache. She bent down and whispered something to the boys. All 3 looked across the street at him. Min waved first, then Sae. June hesitated, then lifted his hand, slow but steady. Daniel stepped out of the car, unsure whether to walk closer. But Camila raised her hand and beckoned him. It was small, but it was something real, something beginning. And Daniel, breath catching in his throat, stepped onto the sidewalk, toward the family he never thought he'd be allowed to know. Daniel started showing up, not every day, not without warning, but enough for the boys to begin expecting him. Enough for their eyes to light up when they saw him standing at the park gate, or waiting near the school with that same awkward, nervous energy of someone trying to learn how to belong. Camila watched from a distance. She didn't know what to do with the storm that stirred inside her every time he was near. He didn't push. He never crossed a line. He came when she allowed, left when she needed space. But that didn't make it easier. If anything, it made it harder. Because the Daniel she had built walls against, the one who vanished, the one who left her in the dark, he was gone. And this new man, this Daniel, was soft-spoken with the boys, patient with their questions, willing to sit on a cold bench for an hour just to watch them draw stick figures in the dirt. But most of all, he looked at them like they were the sun, like they were the light he had been living without for too long. Camila couldn't stop noticing, and that terrified her more than anything. One evening, the boys were with Hannah, and Camila sat at the kitchen table, a half-filled mug of tea in her hands and a blanket draped over her shoulders. The apartment was too quiet without their voices, too still. So when a knock came at the door, she jumped. She didn't have to ask who it was. She knew. She opened the door slowly. Daniel stood there, holding a small paper bag, his posture tense but hopeful. "I brought soup," he said, voice low. "Hannah said you weren't feeling well." She nodded. "Just a cold." "I'm okay." He held out the bag anyway. She hesitated, then stepped back. "You can come in, just for a minute." Daniel walked in cautiously, eyes moving around the space. He had never been inside before, never seen the walls the boys had drawn on, the cracked corner of the table where S.E. had once spilled glue, the low shelf lined with tiny shoes. "Thank you," she said, setting the bag down. Daniel nodded. "I didn't make it, but I picked it myself." A soft silence followed. Then, as he looked at her, he asked gently, "Do you sleep at all?" Camila let out a bitter laugh. "Mothers don't sleep. They collapse." He smiled faintly, then sobered. "I think about it a lot. All those nights you were alone. I try to imagine how you did it." "I didn't have a choice," she said. "They needed me. I should have been there." "Yes," she said, voice sharp. "You should have." Daniel bowed his head, ashamed. But she wasn't done. "You left me to give birth alone, Daniel. 3 babies. No money, no family. I almost died from exhaustion. And even after they were born, I'd wake up every 2 hours just to make sure they were still breathing." Her voice broke now. "I was so scared, all the time, that something would happen and no one would find me. That I'd get sick and they'd be alone." Daniel's face crumpled. "I'm sorry." She turned away, covering her mouth with her hand. "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness," he said quietly, "but I will never stop saying I'm sorry." She was quiet for a long time. Then, with her back still to him, she whispered, "They ask about you, more and more each day." Daniel closed his eyes. "What do you tell them?" "That you're trying." And then, after a pause, "That I'm still trying too." She turned to him, eyes glossy with unshed tears. "I don't know how to let you in without risking everything again. I'm not asking you to." "Yes, you are," she said. "You are every time you show up. And I don't know how to stop you." A heavy silence stretched between them. Then Daniel stepped forward, slow, careful. "Camila," I was a coward. I let fear and pride control me. I let my mother erase you from my life. I thought I was protecting myself, but I was just running. From you, from what we had, from the kind of man I needed to be. He looked at her now, fully, as if daring her to see the truth in him. But I'm not running anymore. Her throat tightened. She wanted to believe him. She almost did. But belief came with danger, with memory, with the risk of loving him again. I'm not ready, she said, her voice barely a whisper. He nodded. Then I'll wait. She looked at him, really looked, and saw that he meant it. He walked toward the door, paused, and added, "Tell the boys I said goodnight." "I will." He left, and as the door clicked softly shut behind him, Camila collapsed into the nearest chair, her chest trembling, tears finally slipping. Free. Not really. She had buried it deep, the way people bury wreckage, under routine, under survival, under 1,000 little tasks that kept her from remembering how close she came to disappearing. But that morning, as she walked past the pharmacy near the old clinic, something in the air pulled her back. She stopped, mid-step, frozen by a smell, disinfectant and winter rain. A scent she hadn't breathed in since the night she gave birth. Her knees felt weak. She gripped the wall beside her, knuckles white, as the memory surged back. The cold tile floor, the trembling in her legs, the sound of her own voice screaming for help in the darkness of a room too quiet, too empty. That evening, she sat on the edge of her bed, staring at nothing, the memory clinging to her skin like a second shadow. The boys were at Hannah's again. Daniel had offered to take them to the bookstore afterward. They were safe, happy, but she wasn't. Not in this moment. The knock on the door was soft. She knew it was him. She opened it without a word. Daniel stood there holding a small stack of children's books and a bag of snacks the boys had picked. His face shifted the second he saw her. "You okay?" She opened the door wider. He stepped inside. Camila didn't speak at first. She moved slowly to the couch, wrapped the blanket tighter around her shoulders, and stared at the window. "I need to tell you something," she said quietly. Daniel sat across from her, eyes full of something cautious. Not fear, reverence. She took a shaky breath. "When I went into labor, it was storming, cold. I was alone in that attic room above the photo shop. The electricity had gone out hours before." Daniel's expression froze. "I tried to call Yunmi, but the battery died. No one came. Her voice cracked. "I was on the floor, screaming, crying. I could feel all three of them coming too fast." She gripped her hands together tightly. "I was bleeding, Daniel. So much blood. I remember thinking, this is it. This is how I go. And all I could think about wasn't me. It was them. That they'd be born into silence. That no one would be there to hold them." Tears spilled down her cheeks, silent and relentless. Daniel leaned forward, breath caught in his throat, his voice hoarse. "Camila, I remember trying to crawl to the door. I thought if I could just scream loud enough, someone would hear me. But my body, it wouldn't move." She closed her eyes. And then suddenly, she was there. Yunmi. I still don't know how. She said she had a feeling something was wrong. She found me unconscious. Daniel looked like he couldn't breathe. She saved us, me and the boys. And after they were born, Camila's voice softened. "I begged her not to take me to a hospital. I didn't want them registered. I didn't want her to find us." Daniel's jaw clenched, his fists shaking at his sides. He knew who she meant. "My mother," he whispered. Camila nodded. "I wasn't afraid for me. I was afraid she'd take them, erase me, make them disappear into a world where I didn't exist." A beat of silence. Then she looked at him, eyes full of all the things she had never said before. "I wasn't just abandoned. I was hunted." Daniel stood slowly, walked toward her, knelt down in front of the couch. She didn't stop him. His voice was barely audible. "I didn't know. God. Camila, I didn't know." "I believe you," she whispered. That broke him. Daniel lowered his head into her lap, his shoulders trembling. She didn't move for a long time. Then, slowly, her fingers reached up and rested on his hair. "I've hated you," she said softly, "for so long, but I never stopped wishing you had been there." He looked up at her, eyes red. "I wish I had too, every single day." Silence settled over them again. Not heavy, not painful, just honest. She wiped her cheeks with the sleeve of her sweater. "I think," she said, after a moment, "I need to stop pretending that night didn't break me." Daniel's voice was rough. "Let me help you rebuild." Camila looked at him, really looked, and for the first time, she didn't see the man who left. She saw the man trying to stay, trying to be something her boys could reach for, something she could maybe trust again. Her voice was a whisper. "One step at a time." Daniel nodded. "Every step. I'll be there." And for the first time in 5 years, Camila allowed herself to lean into the warmth of another person. Not because she was weak, but because she was strong enough to know healing didn't have to be lonely. Like mirrors, reflecting a version of life Daniel no longer wanted to belong to. He stood on the front steps for a long moment before ringing the bell. He didn't want to be here, but he needed to be. The door opened with the soft click of expensive hinges. A butler greeted him with the same practiced nod he'd given since Daniel was a teenager. "Your mother is in the solarium," he said. Daniel walked through the house slowly, his steps echoing off the cold floor. Every corner was spotless, every painting perfectly centered, everything hollow. He found her sitting with a porcelain teacup in her hand, dressed in a cream silk blouse and reading the financial pages. She looked up, unsurprised. "I thought it was time," she said calmly. He didn't sit. "I'm not here to talk," he replied. She set her cup down, her expression unreadable. "Then why are you here, Daniel?" "To end this." His voice was steady, sharp. Her eyebrows arched slightly. "End what exactly?" "All of it," he said. "The control, the silence, the pretending." She stood slowly, crossing the room with the elegance of someone born into command. "I did what I had to do to protect you." "No, you did what you had to do to protect yourself. And your legacy." She narrowed her eyes. "Camila would have destroyed you." "She saved me," he snapped. "She raised 3 children while you told me she abandoned me. She bled alone on a floor while I stood in boardrooms. And you," his voice cracked, "you made sure I never knew." His mother folded her arms, but her expression faltered. "I gave you a future. You took my family." Silence stretched. Daniel stepped forward now, the weight of everything he'd carried pressing against every word. "I missed their birth, their first words. I wasn't there when Camila nearly died. I didn't hold my children when they cried. And you knew." Her jaw clenched. "You made me believe she left me. You erased her like she was disposable. I did it to protect our name." "No," he cut in. "You did it because you thought they weren't good enough. But I see it now. You were never protecting me. You were protecting yourself, your reputation, your place in a world I no longer want to be part of." He took a breath, steadied himself. "I'm done with this house, with this life you chose for me." Her voice turned cold. "You'd throw away everything? For what? For her? For them?" he said, his voice thick. "For the boys who look at me and don't understand why I wasn't there. For the woman who carried them while the world abandoned her. For the man I should have been a long time ago." His mother's eyes glistened. "Just for a moment. I gave you everything." "No," Daniel said quietly. "You gave me nothing that mattered." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small envelope. "Legal documents. I've moved my shares into a trust for the boys. The rest, I don't care." "You're throwing your inheritance away?" "I'm reclaiming my life." Her voice shook now, anger masked in ice. "You're choosing a woman who lied to you." "She never lied," he said. "She survived you." He turned toward the door. She didn't follow. "Daniel," he paused, hand on the doorknob. "She'll never truly belong to this world." He looked over his shoulder, eyes calm. "Then I'll build one where she does." And with that, he walked out. The door shut behind him with a finality that echoed through the marble halls. That night, Camila was sitting at the table, sketching a new floral arrangement design when her phone buzzed. A message from Daniel. "It's done. I'm free." She stared at the screen. Then, "You don't owe me anything. But if you ever wondered whether I choose you, I just did." Her hand trembled slightly, but not with fear. She didn't respond. She didn't have to. She looked toward the boys' bedroom. They were asleep. Daniel's fingers fumbled. June sighed. "That's not right," he mumbled. Daniel looked up, a sheepish grin pulling at his mouth. "No, you're doing bunny ears. Amma does the ninja loop." Daniel blinked. "There's a ninja version?" "Yeah," June said, kneeling beside him. "Watch." June's tiny fingers moved quickly, deftly. Over, under, loop, twist, pull. Done. Daniel stared at the tied shoe like it was a magic trick. June looked up at him with the smallest, tiniest smirk. And something inside Daniel cracked open, a space that had been closed for too long. Started small. A Saturday morning at the park, where SAE insisted on racing him across the field and screamed when Daniel let him win too easily. "Not fair," SAE shouted. "You didn't run full speed. I'm old." Daniel argued between breaths, hands on his knees. "And I haven't sprinted in a suit before." "No excuses," SAE said, grinning. "Next time, no holding back." Min preferred to sit on the bench beside Daniel, notebook in his lap, sketching quietly. "What are you drawing?" Daniel asked once, peering over his shoulder. Min hesitated, then tilted the paper. Daniel saw 4 stick figures, 3 small boys holding the hands of a taller man with messy brown hair. "That's me?" he asked. Min nodded. "You're better at pushing swings than Amma." Daniel smiled, his throat suddenly tight. "That's the best picture I've ever seen." Min looked at him with wide eyes. "Do you want to keep it?" Daniel looked at him like he'd just offered the moon. "Yes," he said softly. "I'd be honored." And Camila watched all of it, quietly, cautiously, not ready to name what she was feeling, but seeing the way her son's eyes lit up, the way they began to lean into him. Not with blind trust, but with curiosity, with growing comfort. It stirred something deep inside her. One evening, as she wiped down the kitchen counter, she found a piece of paper folded neatly under June's backpack. A list, written in clumsy handwriting. Things Appa does good, pushes swings, listens, makes good ramen, doesn't laugh when I cry, even when I try not to, said sorry to Amma. Camila folded the list and held it to her chest, eyes stinging. She wasn't ready to say anything out loud, but she was beginning to believe that maybe, this time, Daniel wouldn't disappear. One night, the power went out. A short circuit from the rainstorm had cut electricity across the block. The boys screamed in surprise, tumbling out of their bedroom in a panic. Camila lit candles and gathered them in the living room. Daniel had been there for dinner and was already reaching for a flashlight from the shelf when SAE latched onto his arm. "It's dark," he cried. "I hate the dark." Daniel scooped him up instantly, holding him close. "I've got you. You're safe," he murmured. "Nothing's gonna get you while I'm here, all right?" SAE buried his face in his chest. Min clung to Camila's leg. June sat stiffly, trying to act brave, but his eyes were wide. Daniel grabbed the flashlight, turned it on, and then made a silly face in the glow. Min blinked, then giggled. Daniel stuck his tongue out dramatically, eyes crossed. SAE laughed. June cracked a smile, and soon the room filled with laughter, the kind that chases shadows out. "Wanna play flashlight tag?" Daniel asked, pointing the beam around the ceiling like a magic wand. "Yes!" they all shouted. And just like that, the fear was forgotten. The house became a castle, the darkness a game, and their laughter the brightest light. Camila sat back on the couch, a candle flickering beside her. She watched them, her sons, their father, moving through the dark like stars, and her heart ached, not with sadness, but with the weight of healing. When the lights finally came back, the boys groaned in disappointment. "I liked it better when it was dark," June declared. Daniel looked at Camila across the room, his smile soft. "Me too." She didn't answer, but she didn't look away, and that was enough. The next morning, Daniel arrived with a lunchbox he claimed he made himself. The boys opened it eagerly. Inside were 3 bento boxes, shaped like bears with rice ball eyes and tiny sausage ears. "This is adorable," Camila said, stunned. "Pinterest," Daniel admitted. "Don't judge me." The boys loved it. June even hugged him. Full hug, tight arms around his waist. Daniel didn't move for a second, like he couldn't believe it was real. Then he knelt down and hugged him back. Camila had to turn away. Her eyes were already full. Min sat cross-legged on the floor, coloring in a book. Sai was building a crooked tower with blocks. June, unusually quiet, lay on his stomach, staring at a photo he'd taken from Camila's drawer. The only one she had of herself and Daniel from years ago, printed on thin paper and folded at the edges. She didn't notice what he was holding at first. Not until he spoke. "Did you love him before he left?" Camila froze mid-fold. She turned slowly, eyes finding her eldest son, his brows drawn, his tone too serious for a child his age. The photo sat on the floor beside him, the edges worn. Min looked up. So did Sai. Suddenly, the air in the room changed. She sat down beside them, the shirt still clutched in her hands. "Yes," she said softly. "I did." June didn't look at her. "So why did he leave?" The question was sharper this time. Not curious, wounded. Camila's heart tightened. She reached out, gently placing a hand on his back. Because he was scared. And because some people told him things that weren't true. Like what? She hesitated. How do you tell your child that the world had once treated their mother as if she were disposable? That wealth and fear and shame had stolen years from all of them? "He was told I didn't want him," she said slowly. "That I'd walked away. And because he didn't ask me, because he believed what others said, he made a terrible mistake." June sat up, his voice cracking. "But you didn't leave him, right?" "No," she whispered. "I never would have." Min moved closer, his small hand finding hers. "Did you cry when he didn't come back?" She nodded, eyes glistening. "Every night." Sai, sitting silently now, tilted his head. "So why is he here now?" "Because he finally knows the truth." The room fell quiet again. June spoke last. "And if he didn't know, would he still be gone?" Camila didn't answer right away. She didn't want to lie. She couldn't. "Maybe," she said. June looked down, jaw clenched. "I don't want him to go again." And there it was, the fear none of them had dared to say until now. Camila leaned in, pulling all 3 of them into her arms. "I don't think he will," she whispered, her voice trembling. "He's trying every day, and you're allowed to be afraid. You're allowed to take your time. But he's not going anywhere unless you ask him to." Min sniffled. "What if I want to ask him stuff he doesn't like?" "Then ask him," Camila said. "He's the one who left. He's the one who has to be brave now." Sai's voice was small. "Can we tell him what it felt like? When we didn't have him?" She kissed the top of his head. "Yes, tell him everything." The next afternoon, Daniel picked them up from school. He was waiting with a backpack full of snacks and a picnic blanket. June climbed into the back seat in silence. Min followed with a wave. Sai flopped into the middle seat, looking out the window. They drove to the hill near the lake, where trees swayed gently and dragonflies hovered above the grass. Daniel laid the blanket out, passed juice boxes around, tried to joke, but the boys were quieter than usual. He noticed. "Everything okay?" he asked softly. June looked at him. "Can we talk?" Daniel's heart jumped. He nodded. "Of course." The 3 boys sat in front of him now, serious like soldiers before battle. June spoke first. "Why didn't you try harder to find us?" Daniel exhaled slowly. "I didn't even know you existed. I thought your mom had left me." "Why didn't you ask her?" Min asked. "I should have," Daniel said. I was afraid, and I listened to someone I shouldn't have. That's not an excuse. It's a mistake. A huge one. See, tilted his head. Did you ever think about us? Even when you didn't know? Daniel smiled sadly. All the time. I didn't know what I was missing. But I knew something was missing. June's voice shook. We used to ask Amma if we were missing a piece. Daniel reached out slowly, hand resting near the edge of the blanket. You weren't missing a piece, he said gently. You were whole. You were just waiting for someone who didn't deserve to be found so easily. Min looked at him carefully. Do you get scared now? Daniel nodded. Every time I think you won't want me. June watched him. I want to want you. Daniel's chest tightened. That's enough for me. C leaned forward and whispered, Can we tell you things? About when we were babies? Daniel blinked, startled. Yes, please. So they told him. About the time Min had pneumonia and Camila slept beside him for 3 days straight without eating. About the night all three had fevers, and she cried because she couldn't afford medicine. So she boiled water and held them close for hours. About the birthday when June asked for a cake and they only had toast, but she put candles in them anyway. Daniel listened, and as they spoke, tears ran silently down his cheeks. Not loud, not desperate, just steady. They didn't stop talking, not even when he cried. They just kept going, because they needed him to hear it, and he needed to carry it. All of it. When they were done, there was silence. Then June reached across the blanket and placed his hand in Daniel's, followed by Min, then Sae, and Daniel gripped them like lifelines. He didn't speak, didn't promise. He just stayed, and that finally was enough. Her reflection stared back. Tired eyes, pale skin, the faint lines of exhaustion etched deeper than she remembered. The smile she had worn earlier, watching Daniel and the boys laugh under the sun, was gone now. In its place, a silence she didn't know how to carry anymore. She splashed cold water on her face, hoping it would numb the tightness in her chest. Didn't. When she looked up again, her eyes welled without warning. She pressed her hands to her cheeks, like holding the pain in would stop it from spilling out. But it didn't. The tears came anyway, hot, exhausting, silent. She slid to the floor, and for the first time in years, she let herself break. Fully, without the boys watching, without a reason to be strong. She wasn't crying because of Daniel. She wasn't crying because of the past. She was crying because, somehow, it wasn't over. She thought that by surviving, she'd healed. That by building a life for her sons, she had moved on. But now, with them loving Daniel, with him becoming something real in their world again, all of the pain she had pushed down was rising, wave by wave. She wasn't angry anymore. She was tired. Tired of holding so much alone. Tired of not knowing who she was beyond survival. Tired of wondering what might happen if she let her heart open again. And it shattered. Later that night, Daniel knocked on the apartment door, holding a bag of groceries and a comic book Sae had left in the car. He wasn't expecting anything. Maybe just a smile. But Camila opened the door with red-rimmed eyes and a quiet stillness around her that made his chest tighten. You okay? He asked gently. She nodded once, stepped aside to let him in. The boys were asleep. The apartment was dim, quiet. He placed the groceries on the table, but didn't say anything. When he turned, she was standing near the kitchen, arms wrapped around herself, staring out the window. I don't know how to do this, she whispered. Daniel stepped closer, but didn't touch her. You don't have to know, he said. We're figuring it out together. I feel like I'm unraveling, she said, voice trembling. Every day that you show up, I feel something let go. And it scares me, because what if I let go completely? What if I need you again? He said nothing, just listened. She turned toward him, eyes full of something deeper than fear, grief. I spent so long building this version of me, the mother, the protector, the one who never breaks. She paused, breath caught. But the truth is, I'm breaking. I'm still angry, still scared. And I don't know if I'm allowed to feel that anymore. The boys need me to be okay. Daniel took a slow breath, voice quiet. They don't need you to be perfect, Camila. They just need you to be real. A tear slipped down her cheek. I don't know how to stop surviving, she whispered. He stepped closer now, just close enough for her to hear his heartbeat. Then let me help, he said. Not fix you, not carry it all. Just stand beside you while you feel everything you've been holding in. She closed her eyes. I'm not ready to trust it. Any of it. I know. And I don't want the boys to get hurt if you... I'm not leaving, he said. You don't have to believe that yet. Just let me stay long enough to prove it. The silence between them pulsed like a heartbeat. Then she nodded. Once, a fragile, exhausted, but real gesture. Daniel didn't move to touch her. He just sat down on the floor beside her, back against the cabinet. Not as a lover, not even as a partner, just as someone willing to stay, even in the quiet, even in the dark. The next morning, Camila woke up earlier than usual. The apartment was still. Dawn light crept through the curtains. She walked into the kitchen to find Daniel asleep on the couch, curled up awkwardly with SAE on his chest and Min curled against his side. June was sitting at the table, drawing in his notebook. He looked up at her. Amma, he whispered. Can we keep him? Camila blinked, then smiled. I don't know, she whispered. Maybe we can try. June nodded solemnly, as if the matter was settled. Camila watched them for a moment. The man who had once broken her now holding the pieces of the life she had rebuilt. And she knew she wasn't healed. There was a hum of excitement in the air. The annual Foundation Gala was one of the city's most anticipated events, and tonight, Daniel Park was to receive a Lifetime Achievement Award for his contributions to child welfare and community development. Camila sat near the back of the hall, dressed in a soft green gown she hadn't worn in years. It wasn't her world. The glittering chandeliers, the laughter of people who'd never missed a meal, the glasses of champagne balanced effortlessly on silver trays. But she was there because Daniel had asked her to come. Not pressured, not pleaded, just asked. And she'd said yes. Beside her, the boys fidgeted in their tiny suits, more excited about the dessert table than the speeches. June leaned in close. Is he nervous? Camila smiled faintly. Probably, C whispered. I hope he doesn't forget his words. He won't, Min replied seriously. He practiced with us. Camila didn't speak. She just watched the stage, her heart pounding harder than she wanted to admit. Behind the velvet curtain, Daniel stood still, palms slightly damp, his breath steady but shallow. He adjusted his tie once more, even though it was already perfect. Are you ready, sir? One of the hosts asked. He didn't answer right away, then nodded. I have to be. The crowd applauded as the announcer read his accolades. All the numbers, the achievements, the grants, the awards. But Daniel heard none of it. His mind was with the woman sitting at the back of the room, and the three boys who had forgiven him far sooner than he'd ever forgiven himself. When his name was called, he stepped onto the stage, blinking under the bright lights. A standing ovation met him. He nodded politely, took the microphone, but he didn't speak from the script. He folded the paper in his hands and set it aside. Then he looked at the crowd. Powerful men and women, CEOs, politicians, cameras, and exhaled. I don't want to talk about the last 5 years, he said. I want to talk about the 5 I lost. The room stilled. I used to believe that legacy was about power, about reputation, numbers, honors. He paused, gaze steady. But then I met 3 small boys who didn't care about any of that, who only cared about whether I'd show up the next day, whether I'd remember their favorite snack, whether I'd listen when they said they were scared of the dark. A quiet murmur swept the room. He continued, and I remembered a woman I once failed, the strongest person I've ever known, who carried everything I abandoned, and still found a way to raise 3 of the kindest human beings I've ever met. Camila's breath caught. I am not proud of the man I was. I am not here tonight because I earned your applause. I'm here because someone gave me the chance to become better. He looked out into the crowd and found her. Camila, her eyes locked on his. I want the world to know that I didn't build my life alone. It was built on the back of a woman who never got credit, who never stood on this stage, but who deserves it more than I ever will. People were listening now, truly listening. He went on. I'm proud of the work I've done for children, but there are 3 children out there who changed my life more than I could ever change theirs. A beat. I'd like to invite them up here. Gasps echoed softly. Camila stood in shock as the spotlight turned toward her table. She shook her head at first, stunned. But June had already risen. Min followed. Saeed jumped out of his seat. They turned to her, wide-eyed. Can we go? Min whispered. She looked up at the stage. Daniel stood waiting, eyes full of emotion. Her hand trembled, but she nodded. Yes. The boys rushed forward, tuxedos too big, shoes clicking against the floor. Daniel knelt to meet them halfway, his arms wide. He embraced them in front of everyone. Then he turned to the microphone once more. These are my sons, he said. No more secrets, no shame, only truth. And to the woman who raised them without me, who taught them what love looks like, thank you. Camila sat frozen. People were already turning to look at her. Applause growing louder. She wanted to disappear. She wanted to cry. But mostly she wanted to breathe. So she stood. Slowly. The lights followed her now. The world watched. But all she saw was the stage. The man, the boys, and a moment she never thought would come. She walked forward, step by step. Daniel's eyes met hers as she reached the stairs. He offered his hand. She stared at it for a long moment, then took it. He pulled her gently onto the stage, standing beside her, not in front. Never again. The applause rose, louder now but distant, like background noise to something sacred. Daniel leaned in. His voice meant only for her. You didn't have to come. I know. Thank you. She looked at him, really looked, and for the first time she didn't feel the weight of the past pressing on her chest. Instead, she felt the tremble of something new. Not certainty, not perfection. No one spoke much. The moment on stage still lingered, raw, bright, unreal. Daniel kept glancing sideways, unsure if he was allowed to speak first, unsure if she would. When they reached the apartment building, she stopped at the bottom of the stairs. I'll take it from here, she said softly, reaching to lift Saeed. Daniel adjusted his grip, not handing him over just yet. I can help carry him up. You already carried enough tonight. Her voice wasn't cold, but it was clear. Daniel looked into her eyes and saw what was waiting behind them. Not rejection, not anger, but something heavier. She turned to the boys. Go ahead, brush your teeth and get into pajamas. Min and June nodded and disappeared up the steps, quiet as shadows. Camila waited until the door clicked behind them before speaking again. You made a speech, she said. I meant every word. She crossed her arms over her chest. It was honest, brave. He smiled faintly. That sounds like a but is coming. It is. She met his eyes then, and her voice no longer trembled. That night doesn't erase the others. Daniel nodded slowly. I know. It doesn't erase the years I woke up in a panic, or the nights I cried so softly I thought my throat would bleed. It doesn't undo the fact that I begged the universe for one more day of strength just so the boys wouldn't see me fall apart. He lowered his head, taking in her words without flinching. You got to make a speech, she continued. I got silence. I got abandonment. I got decisions made for me. I was wrong, he said, voice raw. Every choice I made back then was built on fear and pride. I can't fix the past, Camila. I can only earn a place in the present. She stepped closer now, close enough that her scent, lavender and something warm, made his chest ache. I need boundaries, she said. For me, for the boys. Name them, he replied without hesitation. Whatever you need. No promises you can't keep. I won't. No surprise visits. Agreed. You don't get to discipline them. Not yet. He nodded again. You listen more than you talk. You ask before you assume. You stay even when it's quiet. I will. And if you ever leave again, her voice cracked just slightly, If you even think of leaving again, you tell me first. You say it. To me. Not in silence. Not with distance. Not by disappearing. He stepped closer, his voice shaking now. I'm not going anywhere. You don't say that unless you're sure. I've never been more sure. Silence held them in a gentle standoff. Then finally she reached out, slow, deliberate, and took Sae from his arms. The boy stirred but didn't wake, resting his head on her shoulder like he had 100 times before. She adjusted the blanket around him. You're trying, she said softly, and I see it. Daniel felt the weight of her words settle in his chest like something sacred. I'm not asking to be let in all at once, he said. Just don't shut the door all the way. She looked at him for a long moment, and then, finally, quietly, she nodded. The porch light flickered above them. He turned to leave, but before he did, she called his name. Daniel! He paused. She looked down at Sae, then back at him. They smile more now. His breath caught, and for the first time he let a tear fall without hiding it. The next few weeks became a quiet rhythm. Daniel would pick the boys up once a week from school. He never came upstairs unless invited. He always asked before suggesting plans. He kept every promise. No interruptions, no grand gestures, just presence, just patience. He listened when Sae talked for 20 minutes straight about dinosaurs. He read every comic Min showed him. He played chess with June, who pretended not to care but asked for a rematch every single time he lost. And slowly, things began to settle. Not perfectly, but peacefully. One evening, Daniel brought over a board game. Only if we're invited, he said at the door. Camila smiled. You are. They played until the boys were yawning between turns. When it was time to leave, Daniel stood in the hallway with Camila, the door half closed behind him. He looked down at his hands, then back at her. Do you think, he asked carefully, you'll ever stop waiting for me to fail? She didn't answer right away. Then, maybe not. Daniel nodded. But that's okay, she added, because I'm not waiting for you to fix me either. They stood there for a moment, the kind of silence that no longer hurt. Then she said quietly, You're doing it, Daniel. You're becoming the father they needed. He blinked fast, swallowing hard. And the man? He asked. The man you needed? She stepped back, hand on the doorknob. You're getting closer. And then she closed the door, slow and gentle. But this time, it didn't feel like goodbye. Daniel was sitting cross-legged on the living room floor, his shirt sleeves rolled up, carefully cutting construction paper shapes. June sat beside him with his tongue between his teeth, concentrating hard on gluing stars to a homemade card. Sae was in charge of stickers, which meant stickers ended up everywhere, even on Daniel's cheek. And Min sat on the couch, drawing in quiet focus. It was Sunday afternoon. No plan, no agenda, just the slow, sweet kind of peace that made Camila pause in the hallway before stepping in. She stood there, unnoticed, watching them. The man who had once vanished was now on his knees, helping her sons craft cards for their school project. No cameras, no show, just Daniel, real and soft, gently wiping glue off Sae's chin and complimenting June's crooked stars like they were works of art. Her throat tightened unexpectedly. Amma, Sae spotted her first. Come see. Appa glued his fingers together. Daniel looked up sheepishly, holding up both hands. Not my proudest moment. She walked in slowly, a soft smile tugging at her lips. Did you use the strong glue? I thought it was child safe. Min snorted. Child safe doesn't mean Daniel safe. They all laughed, and Camila did too. For the first time in what felt like forever, it came without effort. Later, after the boys had run off to the balcony to chase Bubbles, Camila found Daniel in the kitchen, washing dishes. You don't have to do that, she said. I know, he replied, rinsing a plate. But I want to. She leaned against the doorway, arms crossed loosely. You're different, she said. He didn't look up right away, just kept rinsing, stacking. Different how? Not just changed. Different. He paused. I think, when you lose everything that matters, and then you're lucky enough to get a glimpse of it again, You stop taking anything for granted. She watched him for a long moment. They trust you now. I know. They love you. He finally turned, water dripping from his hands. That's what scares me most. Camila blinked. Why? Because I failed them once. And the closer we get, the harder it is to live with the fear that I'll fail again. She stepped closer. You won't. He looked at her. You don't know that. No, she said softly. But I see you trying. I see you staying. He searched her face for something. Forgiveness, maybe, or permission. Can I ask you something? He said quietly. Of course. Do you ever think there might be something left between us? The words dropped between them like a ripple in still water. Camila didn't answer right away. Her eyes drifted toward the balcony, where the boys' laughter rose like music. Then back to Daniel. I don't know, she said honestly. There was so much hurt, so much distance. I know, but sometimes... She hesitated, her voice barely audible. Sometimes I catch myself wondering how it might have been, if you'd stayed, if we'd had all of this from the start. Daniel's chest rose and fell slowly. I wonder that too. Silence again. Then she added, but wondering isn't enough. Not for me. If something's going to grow again, it has to come from truth, not nostalgia. I don't want the past, he said firmly. I want something real, new, something we build together. She looked down, fingers fiddling with the edge of her blouse. I'm still healing. Then let me walk beside you while you do. Camila glanced up. No shortcuts, no expectations. He nodded. No pressure, just hope. She stared at him for a beat longer, then nodded. It wasn't a promise, but it was something. That night, after the boys had gone to bed, Camila stepped out onto the balcony. Daniel was still there, sitting on the floor with a blanket wrapped around his.